There are questions that leave us uncomfortable. There are truths that don't scream but whisper in the corridors of power. And sometimes those whispers turn into global headlines. Today we're not just asking why, we're digging into a reality that many don't want to talk about. Why is America, the world's most powerful nation, openly supporting Pakistan, even when India stands tall as the world's largest democracy? Let's take a breath, because this isn't just about politics. It's about power, it's about positioning, it's about who controls the chessboard and who's just a pawn. There are places in the world that seem small on the map, but hold the weight of entire histories, wars, and alliances in their soil. Pakistan is one of those places. When you look at it, you may just see a nation of over 240 million people, a land with culture, chaos, struggle, and spirit. But when world powers like America look at Pakistan, they don't just see a country, they see a position on the global chessboard that can tip the balance of power. It sits in a neighborhood that the world has never stopped watching. To the west, Afghanistan, where America fought its longest war. To the north, China, the rising superpower that challenges the old order. And to the east, India, a global democracy and economic powerhouse. Now imagine being in the middle of that. Imagine what it means when your soil becomes the path to every direction of power. That's Pakistan. A country whose geography has often mattered more than its economy, more than its politics, more than its peace. During the Cold War, it wasn't just an ally, it was a launch pad, a listening post. Where Pakistan, listening post, a place where intelligence agencies didn't just observe, they operated. The US knew back then, if you wanted influence in South and Central Asia, you couldn't ignore Pakistan. And even today, that reality hasn't changed. If anything, it's grown deeper, more complex. Think about it. When America needed to move its troops and equipment in and out of Afghanistan for 2 decades, Pakistan was the key transit route. When drones needed to be launched, intelligence gathered, missions executed, Pakistan's skies and back channels were often used, quietly, consistently. Now, the war in Afghanistan may be over, but the importance of that route, that region, it hasn't faded. In fact, with China's rise and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor becoming a central part of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, Pakistan has become even more strategically important, not just to China, but ironically, also to the US. It's complicated. It always is when it comes to geopolitics. One moment, you're shaking hands in public. The next, you're signing deals in silence. One day, you're allies in a war. The next day, your rivals in a vote. But through it all, one thing doesn't change: location. That's why America hasn't completely let go of Pakistan, because having influence in Islamabad means having eyes on Beijing. Having a presence in Pakistan means still having a foot near Iran and a voice in the affairs of Afghanistan. It's not about favoritism. It's not even about friendship sometimes. It's about leverage. Even when the relationship with Pakistan goes through tension over terrorism, over politics, over trust, Washington has always kept the door slightly open. Not because they believe in every decision Pakistan makes, but because they can't afford to ignore what Pakistan is: a geographical pivot. And if you think about it, this isn't just about war. It's also about energy, trade routes, global shipping lines, pipelines, and borders that connect some of the most unstable and important regions on Earth. Whoever influences this region doesn't just watch history unfold, they help shape it. Of course, this comes at a cost. For Pakistan, it's often been a story of being used more than being empowered, of being pulled into someone else's war, someone else's fight, someone else's narrative. And for India, it's a frustration Because while they build global partnerships through diplomacy, trade, and innovation, they still see the US engaging with a neighbor that often acts against India's own national interests. But again, this isn't about who's right. This is about what's real. And the reality is, geography doesn't change. Borders may shift, governments may fall, but the map that defines how the world sees you. So while the world debates intentions, and while countries argue over alliances, America will continue to watch Pakistan not for who it is alone, but for where it is. Because in the end, power always pays attention to position. Sometimes it's not about who your friend is, it's about who your rival is watching. And in today's world, that rival for America is China. China isn't just growing quietly anymore. It's loud, it's fast, and it's everywhere. Building ports in Africa, investing in roads in South Asia, expanding its influence in the Pacific, and even reaching into Europe. It's not knocking on the door of global power, it's already inside the house. And that changes everything. Because when someone starts challenging the world order that's been in place for decades, built on Western power, American dominance, and alliances that served a certain direction, then everyone on that global map starts to become either an asset or a threat. That's where Pakistan comes in. Not as the perfect partner, not even as the most reliable one, but as a necessary piece on a board where every move matters. While India is rising and standing strong, making deals, growing its economy, and expanding its voice on the international stage, it's also becoming more independent. India doesn't always follow Washington's lead, whether it's standing by Russia or staying neutral in global conflicts. India is showing the world that it plays by its own rules now. And that makes America nervous because when you're trying to contain a force like China, you want every country in the region singing your song. But India is writing its own lyrics. So what does America do? It looks at alternatives, options. Countries that may not be ideal but are still influential. Countries that can be used to check China's ambitions in the region, even if only slightly. And Pakistan becomes relevant again. Despite its economic troubles, despite political instability, despite all the criticism it receives, Pakistan remains close to China, almost too close. Beijing is building roads, ports, and infrastructure through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a centerpiece of China's Belt and Road dream. And that alone makes Pakistan a critical watch point for the US. Because if you can't stop a country's rise directly, you start placing counters around it. You don't just watch China, you surround it with relationships, leverage, and influence. That's how global strategy works. And even though America and Pakistan have had a rocky past, filled with trust issues, broken promises, and conflicting goals, the truth is, the door never really closed. Because behind all the diplomatic tension lies a much deeper logic. Proximity is power. The closer you are to the action, the more relevant you become. And America knows that if Pakistan slips too far into China's embrace, economically, militarily, and politically, it loses a piece of control. It loses visibility. It loses options. And that's something no superpower wants, especially when it's trying to compete with the fastest growing one. This doesn't mean America loves everything about Pakistan. It doesn't. But in global politics, love isn't the currency. Strategy is. And when you think of strategy, you stop seeing countries as friends or enemies. You start seeing them as tools, risks, or opportunities. Pakistan is an opportunity, one that can either tilt more toward China or stay somewhere in the middle, where America still has a say. So even when Washington praises India in public, signing defense deals, attending summits, celebrating democracy, it still sends aid to Pakistan. It still approves military upgrades. It still engages. Why? Because it's playing both sides, just enough to stay in the game. And for India, that's frustrating. Because how do you grow a partnership with someone who still entertains your rival? But this isn't just about India or Pakistan. It's about something much bigger. It's about a global race, not for land, not for gold, but for influence. And when influence becomes a prize, every country touching China's borders becomes a pawn, a player, or a possibility. And maybe that's what we need to remember. That not every support is personal. Sometimes it's just positional. And in a world where China's shadow is getting longer every day, America will place its pieces carefully, even if those pieces don't always make sense to the rest of us. Because power doesn't just prepare for today, it prepares for what's coming. And China is coming fast. There are stories that never make it to the headlines. Stories that happen behind closed doors, quiet meetings, unmarked planes, unlashed, unprompted agreements sealed with a handshake, not a signature. This is the world of military and intelligence cooperation, and Pakistan has always been part of it. You don't need to be the richest country or the most stable government to matter in this space. Sometimes, all it takes is access. Access to places others can't reach, access to people others can't talk to, and access to chaos that the world's biggest powers need help understanding. That's where Pakistan has long found its role in the US playbook, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Long before the world was obsessed with TikTok trends and artificial intelligence, there was another obsession: terrorism. After 9/11, America didn't just go to war in Afghanistan. It needed intelligence, safe routes, military bases, and local eyes and ears that could help fight a war unlike any it had fought before. And there is Pakistan, right next door. It had what America needed: proximity to Afghanistan, a military that understood the terrain, and an intelligence agency, the ISI, that had deep, sometimes dangerous, connections with local networks. So, a deal was made. Not a formal one, not something the world would clap for, but an arrangement built on necessity. You help us, we help you. The years that followed were complicated. US drones flew missions from Pakistani soil. Intelligence was shared, ground operations were coordinated, billions of dollars in military aid flowed in. And for a while, it looked like both sides needed each other more than they wanted to admit. But here's the thing: trust was always fragile. America often suspected that Pakistan was playing both sides, hunting terrorists in the day while quietly protecting or tolerating them at night. Pakistan, on the other hand, felt used, like a partner who took all the risks but never got the respect. It was a marriage of convenience, not commitment. Then came the night that changed everything. May 2, 2011, a team of US Navy SEALs flew into Abbottabad, Pakistan, and killed Osama bin Laden, the world's most wanted man, just miles from a military academy. No call was made to Pakistan before the raid. Multiple aircrafts threw into Katahito. That was not unusual. The military was hostile to all Osama bin Laden and killed all men, just miles from a military academy. No call was made to Pakistan, but both flights got stopped there. The way that Pakistan proceeded this day was unfortunate and wrong, but no one can doubt the work of the man behind it. The two began camping. The way that covered is buried the next day. The two weren't alone because two other men became their comrade. No warning, no heads up. The message was clear: we don't fully trust you. And yet, the cooperation never fully ended, because even when trust breaks, necessity has a way of pulling people back together. The US still needed Pakistan, not just for its geographica, but for its ability to operate in the murkiest corners of South Asia. The ISI, for all its controversies, knew things others didn't, and others had to. It had relationships, leverage, and a network that was deeply embedded in the region's power struggles. Even today, as the world tries to shift focus to new technologies, space, and cyber warfare, the old games of intelligence gathering, counterterrorism, and regional control haven't gone away, and Pakistan's role in that game remains intact. That's why military assistance still flows, even when people question it. That's why intelligence officers from both countries still talk, even if no one sees them do it. Because behind every public disagreement, behind every speech, every protest, every media soundbite, there's still a line of communication that never goes silent. For the US, maintaining that connection is about options. Because if something happens in the region, a new terrorist threat, instability in Afghanistan, or rising tensions with Iran, they'll need people on the ground. And Pakistan offers that. Not perfectly, not always reliably, but consistently enough to stay relevant. It's messy, but that's how real-world alliances are. They're not about friendship, they're about function. You don't have to like the one you work with, you just have to know that they can deliver when it matters. And Pakistan, through decades of chaos, war, and diplomacy, has proven that, for better or worse, it can. So while critics question the relationship, and while headlines focus on disagreements, the real work continues in the background. Military files exchanged, intelligence shared, operations approved quietly without applause. Because in this world, silence often means cooperation. And what you don't see is sometimes the most powerful part of the story. There's a language that doesn't use words. It doesn't need speeches or press conferences. It speaks through numbers, agreements, and packages, wrapped in flags and flown across oceans. That language is called military aid. And when America sends it, it's never just out of kidness. It's always about control, influence, and reminding the world where the lines of power are drawn. Pakistan has received billions in aid from the US over the years. Not because it's a perfect ally, not because it follows every instruction, but because strategically it holds more value than its headlines suggest. And one of the clearest symbols of that value has always been its military relationship with Washington, especially when it comes to fighter jets. Yes, the F-16. It's not just a machine of war. It's a message that says, you're still on the list. India knows what that message means, and it stings. Because while New Delhi builds strong defense ties with the US, invests in its own military power, and pushes for a seat at every major global table, it still watches America approve upgrades and support for Pakistan's F-16 program. And it asks, why? The answer, like most things in geopolitics, isn't black and white. It's gray, very gray. On one hand, Washington insists these jets are meant for counterterrorism. They say the upgrades help Pakistan fight threats along its western borders, not eastern ones. But the truth is, India has long feared that these aircraft aren't just about fighting militants. They're also about keeping India in check. And maybe that's exactly the point. Because when you give someone powerful weapons, you're not just helping them, you're reminding others around them that you still have influence, that you still hold the keys, that you can decide who gets what and when. It's a form of diplomacy that doesn't shake hands. It flies, it lands, it roars across borders, and it sends a message before a single word is spoken. Pakistan, for its part, has relied heavily on this support. Its economy may be struggling. Its political climate may be unstable, but its military, especially its Air Force, has been kept strong with American help. Not just with planes, but with training, maintenance, technology, and systems that keep those jets in the sky. This isn't new. It's been happening for decades. Through different presidents, through wars and peace talks, the support has continued. Even when America criticizes Pakistan for harboring extremists or for its democratic lapses, the aid in some form still finds its way through. And that's what makes this so complicated. Because to the outside world, this seems like a contradiction. How can you call out a country on one hand and arm it on the other? But in international politics, contradictions are just strategies in disguise. The US doesn't give aid because of loyalty. It gives aid to maintain leverage, to keep doors open, to ensure that when a crisis hits, there's still a line of influence they can pull. And yes, sometimes it's to balance out other powers in the region, like India, without fully saying it out loud. That's why Even after India protested the most recent F-16 upgrades, the US stood firm. It gave a calm, diplomatic explanation, but the message was already sent. It's not always about what you say, it's about what you do. And when you send military equipment, when you fund programs, when you choose to keep the arsenal alive, you're choosing a side. Even if you say you're neutral, even if you claim it's about peace, the action always speaks louder. For India, this has been a bitter pill, a reminder that no matter how far it rises, some old habits in foreign policy die hard. Some relationships don't end, they just evolve. And for Pakistan, this is a signal of relevance, that despite its challenges, despite the global criticism, it still holds a card that major powers can't afford to ignore. Because an F-16 doesn't just fly, it represents a history, a deal. A quiet understanding between governments that the rest of the world only sees in glimpses. So while leaders change and the world moves forward, these jets remain sharp, fast, and symbolic, not just of war, but of power, of presence, of a message that still echoes. You matter, not because of who you are, but because of what you can do for us when it counts. There's something powerful about standing alone, not because of who you are, but because you've chosen it. Because you know who you are, because you know what you stand for. That's how India has moved on the world stage. Not as a follower, not as someone waiting for approval, but as a country that's carving its own path, with its own pace and its own purpose. India doesn't echo anyone's voice. It speaks with its own. And that hasn't always made people comfortable, especially powerful nations that expect loyalty in exchange for friendship. But India has shown the world that you can be friendly without being dependent. You can build partnerships without becoming anyone's pawn. When the world told countries to take sides, especially in the Russia-Ukraine war, India didn't rush to join the chorus. It didn't bow to pressure. It didn't read the lines others had written. Instead, it chose neutrality. Not because it was afraid to speak, but because it saw things through its own lens. And that, in today's polarized world, is rare. See, India's not trying to win anyone's approval anymore. It's not chasing alignment for the sake of fitting in. It's becoming what it was always meant to be, a sovereign voice with global weight. That independence didn't start yesterday. It's rooted in history, in non-alignment, in standing outside the Cold War blocks when everyone else picked sides, in saying, we will choose what is best for us, not what's convenient for you. And now, decades later, that same philosophy is still alive. Only now, the stakes are higher. India is balancing relationships with the West while still maintaining ties with countries like Iran and Russia. It's strengthening defense deals with the US, but still buying oil from Moscow. It's participating in international summits while refusing to be dictated to by any bloc. And it's doing all of this while keeping its head held high. It's not defiance, it's confidence. The kind that comes from growth. Because India isn't just a country anymore. It's a force. An economy that's one of the fastest growing in the world. A tech hub, a space power, a democracy with more than 1 billion voices. And all of that gives it leverage. The kind that doesn't beg for validation. When America and its allies talk about promoting a rules-based international order, India listens. But it doesn't blindly agree. It remembers how those same rules have often been bent to benefit the West. And so it questions, it challenges, it decides. Even in forums like BRICS and the SEO, where other members lean toward China or Russia, India maintains its position. Steady, clear, and calculated. Not hostile, just honest. This isn't easy. There's pressure from all sides to choose to declare loyalty, to fall in line. But India keeps walking the middle path. Not to play safe, but to play smart. Because the minute you start choosing sides, you start limiting your options. And India isn't interested in limits anymore. It wants trade with everyone, diplomacy with everyone, security ties that don't come with conditions. It wants to protect its own interests, and that sometimes means saying no to what others call cooperation. And yes, that can be frustrating for its partners, especially when decisions are slow or when India doesn't vote the way they want at the UN. But that's the price of dealing with a country that doesn't need to be led. India knows its value. And that's why countries still keep the door open, even when they don't agree with its choices, because they know that India is too important to ignore, too strategic to alienate, too influential to pressure. That's what happens when you're not just a participant, but a player, a real one who walks into a room knowing they bring something vital to the table. India's independent stance isn't a phase. It's not a reaction, it's an identity, built over decades, strengthened by challenges, and now respected around the world. Because true power isn't about how loud you shout, it's about how calmly you say, "We'll decide, on our terms, in our time, for our people." But here's what I believe. Nations don't need to be divided to be strong. Power doesn't always need to be proven by choosing sides. And the world doesn't become safer by playing favorites. India has earned its place at the table through resilience, democracy, innovation, and heart. And no matter what deals are made behind the scenes, the world is watching, and the truth, no matter how long it's delayed, will always rise, because in the end, it's not about who supports you in public. It's about who stands with integrity, even when no one is watching.